předávám slovo Wiebemu, Witteweenovi. Wiebe, I just give introduction, but you can take your speak already. Wiebe je vedoucí Best Value Core týmu v agentuře Ministerstva pro infrastrukturu a životní prostředí, která se jmenuje Rijkswaterstaat. Doufám, že se mi to podařilo tentokrát, ještě se mi to nepodařilo. Jinak je to vítěz Dutch Sourcing Award z roku 2012 za provozní dokonalost a nejlepší veřejnou zakázku roku při implementaci Best Value v hodnotě u projektu nad půl miliardy eur. Je to spoluautor holandské knihy o Best Value, člen nizozemské certifikační rady na Best Value a má 15 let zkušeností v oblasti zadávání veřejných zakázek a smluvních řízení z velkých infrastrukturních staveb. Thank you. The floor is yours.
I hope that was positive. So, good morning, everyone. My name is Wiebe. First of all, I'd like to apologize that Jeroen van der Rijt is not here today. His son was hospitalized this weekend due to an asthmatic attack. So I'll be doing two stories, so you have to look at me for the next 1.5 hours, so sorry about that. But anyway, I'm going to talk to you about the best value approach. And the best value approach, it really is about common sense and logic. It's trying to make things simple or dominant, in other words. That's what we try to achieve with the best value approach. And one way, no, it doesn't work. I thought it worked. No. Can you fix it or?
Okay,
It did work.
It did work. This is...
Okay, maybe just click on the next slide. You can fix it, I'll keep on talking. Okay, so, and a way to make things more dominant or more simple is to use metrics. And metrics are things that everyone can understand. So I put some of my metrics on the next slide, if it's ever going to show up.
Oh, sorry, it worked before the...
Okay. So if you have the metrics, then it's much easier to make a decision. It's less subjective. So for instance, I'm a big fan of soccer and football. And in the previous years, we have seen the data in football become more important, right? In the early systems, we had the scouts, and they were very experienced people. They were sitting together, and they were selecting which people were going to be transferred from one team to the other, right? And now what we see in football is that we get more data from all the players, so we can give a better prediction whether they are a good value for the team or not. So, and if we look at the construction industry, I think one of the problems that we are, and now it works, thank you, we are facing is that we don't know whether a project manager is a good project manager or not, or whether a project was successful or not. So at the core of the best value approach is metrics. We need to know what's going on. And we've done this for 8 years now in the Netherlands, and the contractors and the engineering firms are starting to collect data so they can easily show to us that they have expertise. And we have to make less decision as the government. So these are some of my data, maybe to show you that I know a little bit what I'm talking about. But that is really something you have to remember about the best value approach. So let me give you a small example of my a personal life, an anecdote. I have 2 kids, a son and a daughter. And my son, he's going to school. And one day he had a test that he was going to make. And we were the parents, we were looking at it, and he was doing absolutely nothing. I don't know if any one of you has kids. And then as parents, you start to get a little bit nervous, right? Because you want him to get good grades, because you want the best future for your child. So what we started to do as parents, we started talking to him, you should start learning, and can I help you? And maybe you should start. And in the end, he started, and he got a good grade. But next time around, it was exactly the same problem. He did nothing, absolutely nothing. So then I finally realized we should not control him. We should just let him be. Get a bad grade so he can take his own accountability. And this is exactly what happened. And this is another important aspect of the best value approach, as the ambassador mentioned, is no control. We should release control over the vendors and let them make their own decisions because they have expertise and they're professionals. So that's a very important aspect of of best value. Now, I want to show you this, this metaphor, and Jeroen and I developed a metaphor for the fast track program. I'm going to tell you later about it. And it's actually about climbing mountains. And this is the K2, so this is an, I would say, a challenging mountain to climb. I've never done it. But there are several ways that you can climb a mountain. And one way to climb a mountain is, and suppose that you want to climb this mountain and you're looking for a guide. A guide that's going to help you bring to the top of the mountain and hopefully back alive, right? So there's one way you can do this is that you can say, okay, I want to take this route and we can stop there. And by the way, you should bring this rope and you should bring this type of materials. That's a way to climb this mountain, right? Well, that's basically the low price way, so to speak. Another way to look at this problem is to tell the guide, look, I want to get to the top of the mountain. Can you give me a plan and show me the risks that you see when we're going to climb the mountains? And how are you going to make sure that I get back there alive? And that's exactly what we try to do in achieving the best value approach. We're looking for a guide, an expert, who can bring us to the top of the mountain and back. And this expert, when you ask them, he can see the thing from beginning to end because he knows what he's doing. And I would say that the more details or instructions or minimum norms we impose on the expert, the less chance we have of finding a real expert, actually. So this story is about going to the top of the mountain and how to find the real expert. And by the way, if you have questions, you can interrupt me. If you know the story already, you might have questions. If you have no idea, you might have questions. And any question is a good question, so please ask questions. Otherwise, I will continue to talk. So this is an example of low price. And one of my favorite quotes is, if you think quality is expensive, wait till you hire an amateur, right? So I think we all know these examples from our projects and our life and our work. So I have a question for you. So if you are a buyer, a client, and Rijkswaterstaat is a client, would you hire more expensive people or more cheaper people? Who's a client here? Is anyone? There were some clients. Did you remember, Jaap, who were the clients? Where were they? What do you think? Cheaper or more expensive?
Balance. Always balance between
Balance.
price and...
Okay, that's a compromise answer. But if you hire someone, who's really cheap, you might end up paying a lot more, right? So if you can choose as a client, I would say, and I will elaborate on that later on, that you should always take the one that's higher paid, because that's the one who has a higher productivity, that's the one who has more expertise, that's the one who has more skills. And I think in a normal market, as a client, we should pay for quality, because in the end, we get lower costs, right? So you should always take the more expensive expert and not the cheaper one. Let's see. Yeah, I want to show you this one. This is about accountability. This is the traditional system. So what we see basically in low price systems, or in, oh, it's not finished even. So I'll blame someone else, of course. That's the best game you can play. Always blame someone else. It's always my wife's fault or someone else's fault, you know. So this is really basically the problem in a low price system. You're always looking for other persons to blame. You're always not taking the accountability. And I think that's one of the major problems. And even in the Netherlands, we have this problem as well. So what you're looking for is persons that take accountability for their work, and they feel responsible for what they're doing. So in Holland and all around the world, these things are happening. And the big question is, why are craftsmen, professionals, doing this? And why are these things happening? And what we believe is that the structure or the system we procure projects in is the major problem. And that is the thing we should change. So, and even in the Netherlands, things are going wrong. And I have some examples, and there are, even on YouTube, there are pretty nice films you can watch. For instance, the picture left on the top, where you see the pole is standing in the middle of the parking place. This was a professional at work. Someone put that there. You might wonder what he was thinking. Why would someone put a thing there? I don't know why. I think maybe the most probable explanation is that the client asked for it, right? Because the client has different contracts, and one contract said, put the pole there, and this is what happened. So this is what happens when, and I'm going to talk about this later on, when everyone is in their silo, when you split the work into all these small parts, you bid them low price, this is what you're going to get. So this is not what you want as a client. So here's part of the problem, and one of the problems in price-based system is, and I talked about this just before, is the minimum standards. Because as a client, we always want the minimum standard, and we hope that things are getting better, right? We want more quality, as we stated before. So, but what happens when you're in a low-price system? For the contractors, actually, this minimum for the client becomes the maximum. So it's sort of a paradox, because they have to win this contract, right? And there are like several ways they can win the contract. And there are contractors here in the room, I think. If you're in a low price system, what are good ways to win the contract? How can you earn money in these contracts? Anyone an idea? There are 2 or 3 ways, I would say. And one is on the slide. Someone? First one is you push the quality down. You don't deliver the quality that was asked for, right? That's an obvious one. Another way to earn money in the low price system is of claims. Rework after the award was made. Because you're in a one-on-one situation, and that's where you can earn the money. So these are 2 big incentives that come from a low price system. So this is a problem we are facing as a client. Now let's look at this another way. Say that you are contractor 1, and you have to compete with contractor 4, right? That's the left slide. And contractor 1, he's like a real contractor, like Witteveen and Bos. He's an expert, I don't know. But contractor 1 has a high performance and a low risk. That's what an expert does. And contractor 4 is the contractor you don't want on your project, because he's going to mess everything up, right? So the most common thing we do as procurement people is that we impose a minimum norm. It could be financial, it could be in terms of so many years of experience, or it could be some technical specification, anything. And what this does is, it forces the contractors that can actually perform better, have better people, have higher quality, it forces them to lower their quality, because otherwise they cannot compete with contractor number 4. So this is basically what's happening in a low price system. We're basically driving the quality down, and we're asking contractors not to use their skills. And I think in the end, the taxpayers are losing, because the industry is going down. We're actually killing the industry with this system. So this is a very bad idea. Okay, another way to look at this is the silos, and silos are everywhere. In my own organization, we have silos. And if we look at the supply chain, you can also see a lot of silos. Contractors, lawyers, and so forth. And one of the problems that we have if we are in silos is that most of the time we are driven towards the details. And we start talking a lot about the details. And we forget what we are actually here for. And what we're here for is to reach the project goals, right? Because we want good projects. And what we do in silos is we develop our own language. And when we speak together, outsiders, they have no idea what we're talking about, because that's our own language, right? So this is what happens in silos. And what we want is we want to get out of the details, and we want to go to the 30,000 foot level, where everyone understands what we are doing. And if we do this, then the person in the designer, for instance, he understands what the contractor needs, and the contractor understands what the designer needs. And in order to do that, we need to make things more simple. We need dominant information, and I'm going to show you some examples of that later on. But we need to get out of the details. So that's very important part of the best value system as well. Okay. So now let's look at what is an expert. So there are two types of people. On the left side of the slide, you can see an inexperienced contractor. Now, who does an inexperienced contractor think of? Primarily, he only thinks of himself, because he's in a low price system. He has no incentive to think of others, so he's only occupied with his own risks and with himself, right? Because that's his way to survive. It's the only way to survive in this system. So the only thing he looks at is technical details, and things that are outside of his control, he's not interested in. So you could say this contractor is sort of blind. He looks as far as this. On the other side, we have an experienced contractor. And an experienced contractor is a contractor who can see a project from beginning to end, even before it has started. So he knows what's going to transpire and what's going to happen. So if you are an experienced contractor, what are types of risks that are outside of your control? What's the biggest risk for you? Well, I don't know in the Czech Republic, but in the Netherlands, the biggest risk for contractors are risks that are with the public client. Permits, cables, and so forth. You know, all these public risks. They prevent the contractors from doing their work in a nice way. So if you are a good contractor, you actually think about these risks because they prevent you from doing your work. So if you are an experienced contractor and you know what you're doing, you have a plan which also takes into account the risks that are going to prevent you from doing your work. That means that you also think of other people instead of only yourself. And that's exactly the type of contractor that we're looking for. We want contractors that think of others instead of only think of themselves. Okay, so if we look at the industry structure, then we see, and I've spoken to this about this in the last 15 minutes. In the right lower corner, we see the low price environment, and basically one of the main aspects there is the wrong party talking, because it's the client who's dictating what's going to happen. And what's going to happen is we get a lot of specification, we get a lot of standards, we go low price, and if we go low price, we know the quality will be driven down, which means we have to counter that as a client with more management, inspection and control, right? And in the next project, what do? You think we make the specification bigger or smaller? What do? The specification becomes bigger, right? After every project, the specification becomes larger and larger. So this is actually a vicious circle that enforces itself. So this is a wrong system. And in my opinion, this system leads to collusion, because there's no transparency. And the only way to survive in this system as a contractor is maybe to negotiate with your colleagues, or maybe go to the government and make deals. So I really believe that the low price system is causing collusion, and is really a big problem and causing corruption. And in my next presentation, I'll show that this actually happened in the Netherlands. We had collusion because of, I think, the design bid-build. Combination with low price is a problem. So I believe that we should move up. So we should value the expertise of professional contractors. And we should not only select based on price, as you mentioned, we should also select on value. And we should also let vendors assess their own control, right? So we should do quality assurance instead of quality control. So we should look at the quality systems of the contractors and not at all the products that they are making. The Dutch government, every time there's a new government, they cut down on the civil servants. So the workforce becomes smaller and smaller. So we don't have the time or the capacity anymore to control the work that the contractors do. Okay, so this is lowest price. It's the wrong party talking. And if someone's talking in your ear, you know what you're doing. If I'm talking to my wife, telling her what to do, where is she going to look? She's going to look the other way. she's going to become reactive. So that's not a good idea. Okay, another way to look at this. So if you have different personnel as a contractor, you have very experienced, highly trained personnel, and you have the minimal experience and the medium trained. If you have the unexperienced people, would they prefer working in a low price environment, you think? Are they happy? They might even be too expensive, right? Because they have expertise, they have skills, and the only thing the client is interested in is a low price. So what you're going to get if you're going to get low price, and we as clients are always complaining about the quality of the people the contractors or the engineering firms are offering us. And we say, they're bad quality. But in the end, it's basically us causing the low quality because they're going to send these people over to us, right? So we should change that. Okay. So and I'm going on to how can we find an expert? But what we try to do in procurement is basically to find, let's say, a green circle. And this is a question for you. And beforehand, I'll tell you this is not a trick question, okay? So there's no... Thanks, Sylvester. Bye. So if you are purchasing and you want to buy a green circle, in which scenario, and the lawyers should look very good at this because this is important, in which scenario is hiring the right green circle easiest to justify? Anyone? Come on, it's easy. One or two. No? No one in the Czech Republic knows the answer to this question? Come on. No? Is it that hard? What's the answer? Scenario 2, of course. Because there's only one green circle. Exactly. And this is a real problem because, so if now I'm going to make the bridge to the meat. So if you have, let's say, a meat criteria which is not very discriminating, you're going to end up in scenario 1. So what are you going to get in scenario 1? If you have expertise or a commission looking at the meat criteria, what are you going to get? You're going to get a lot of discussion, right? Because you might think that the left bottom is the most green one, but the other expert sitting next to you, he might think that the other one is more green, right? And that's actually what I've witnessed when I was in these teams. You can discuss for 2 hours about which one is the more green circle. So if we are looking at criteria, at meat criteria, you should get the right criteria. They should be discriminating. Because what we're looking for is like someone who's maybe yellow. Because he's distinguishing himself from the other parties. So what I believe in and what the best value approach is that you should actually use the meat criteria that are rather abstract. Because the more detailed your meat criteria will be, the earlier you'll end up in a scenario 1. Could you agree with me on that? And if you end up in scenario 1, what I'll predict you is that you end up in the low price arena again. Because the contractors, they have no idea what's going to happen, and they will only get back to their low price bidding. So make the meat criteria abstract. That's one of my concrete advice to you. And the best value approach is just one way to do that, and I will show it you in the next slide. But there are dozens of other ways to get good criteria. Okay, let's move. Even kijken in de tijd. Okay, I think I'm well on time. Yeah. So let's look at the best value process. And the best value process, first let me tell you a little bit about it. This process was developed, as was mentioned earlier, by American professor Dean Kashiwagi. He's from Arizona State University. And I think he's developed this around 20 years ago. And in 2007 or 8, I got the possibility to visit his conference. So I picked up these ideas there. And I started implementing them in my office. And the slides I showed you before, they're a little bit about the background of the best value approach. And now I'm going to tell you more about the different steps. So we have 4 phases, and phase 0 is actually the preparation of the contract. Now, what's very important when you prepare a contract, that's actually that you know what the project goals are. And we are going to practice with this later this afternoon. And in my experience, I've done over 25, maybe 30 projects with this. Project teams, usually they have not a very clear idea as to what are their project goals. They know what has to be delivered at the end of time, but what is important in a project, when is a project successful, usually it's not very clear. So one thing, and we try to advocate that, is that we cut back on the specifications. That's the hardest part. Rijkswaterstaat is also, in its origin, a technical organization, and it's very hard to keep the specification as functional as possible. That's, of course, what you want, because if you write a detailed specification, it's a waste if you look from a supply chain perspective, right? Because an expert, he will know what he's doing. So the first phase, we try to keep it as short as possible. And I also think that there's a lot of time to gain there, because sometimes it takes us a year or even longer to prepare a contract. Whereas I think if you do it in a smart way, you can do it a lot shorter. So that's the first phase. In the next phase, we're going to look for the expert, and this is where the meat is applied, and I will explain to you how we do this. And in this phase, we ask the vendors for no more than 6 pages. So I started my presentation, it had to be dominant, it had to be simple. We only need 6 pages to find out who's the expert. And then what we also do is we interview the key personnel. And the key personnel, that's the project manager and maybe the other person that's most important for the project success. And I'll explain to that later. And once we've done that, and then we weigh it, and then we find the expert, and with the expert we enter the clarification phase. And this is still before the award. And in the clarification phase, what we do is and this is of course legal, and we looked at this very closely. They can only clarify the offer. You cannot start to negotiate, right? So we asked him to clarify his plan and to explain to us what he's going to do with all the risks he sees, how he's going to use us as a client. It takes about 8 weeks. And if this phase is successful in the end, we award the contract, and then we go into the execution. And what we have then is an expert with a plan. So let's look at how this works. Well, so if you look at the process, you'll see that best value works sort of like a sieve. So we start in filter 1, and filter 1 used to be in the American system past performance information. Now at Rijkswaterstaat we have started something called performance measurement, and the lawyers here, they will tell you that if you use performance information about companies, you can only use it in the selection, pre-qualification phase, right? So, as Rijkswaterstaat, what we will do in the next few years is we will use this past performance information as a means to pre-qualify either engineering firms or contractors. I would say it is the least important filter. It's important because it can differentiate contractors from each other, but the following filters are much more important because those filters will actually show the expertise of the contractor in this particular project. So, second filter is the risk assessment value added plan, and Jaap spoke a little bit about this. So, if you look for an expert and you want to know what the risks of the projects are, what type of risk would you expect an expert to write down? Any idea? Would you expect him to write about his own risk? Is that an expert? No, of course not. An expert writes about the risks that are outside of his control, because if he is an expert, he actually has no risk because he knows what he's doing, right? So, an expert, we only want to know about the risks that are outside of his control, and what is his plan to mitigate these risks, because that identifies him as an expert. And then what we also want to know, if he has a minimal scope, what can he do extra for us to deliver the project goals better, cheaper, or faster maybe? And that's what we call value add. So we also ask him for 2 pages, give us a value add plan. And these plans, they are all related to the project goals, because that's what we wanted in the end. And we also asked him for his capability, and his capability is he shows his capability to deliver the thing that we asked. I'll show you some examples later on. So then we have the interviews and the rest I showed you. And I would say that the interview is, for the meet criteria, is the most important criterion. Now, why are the interviews so important? Because who are we going to interview? We're going to actually interview the people that are going to do the project. Whereas what we saw in the past is that the contractors, they were sending their tender managers to speak with the clients, and when the contract was awarded, the tender managers left and other people came in, and they ended up with a plan that was not their plan and that they maybe even couldn't make. So who we want to speak to is actually the people that are going to do the job, and those are the people that we're going to interview. And we're going to ask them pretty simple questions, such as, what are the risks you see? How are you going to mitigate this risk? Could you explain to me in 5 minutes, what is your plan from A to Z? And these are very simple questions, and I have witnessed over 100 interviews. I can tell you, these are hard questions to answer. And only expert people can have a plan can have a good answer to these questions. So the interviews is the most important filter in the best value process. So here's another way to show that. Project capability interview. We prioritize them, and basically the prioritization is done in the same way as Jaap has told you about. So we use the monitorization. So we give weights, and I'll show you the weights in the next slide. So we monitorize it, we give them grades, and what we do is we say it's a 5-point scale, so it's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. 10 if it's very good, 2 if it's very poor, 6 if we don't know. So you can imagine we give a lot of 6s, because if we don't know, we just give a 6. So we prioritize him using the monitorization, and then we do what we call a dominance check. And I think I was speaking to Lukas yesterday evening about this. One of the things we do at Rijkswaterstaat, we have this phenomenon we call unacceptable low prices. I guess if you go low price a lot, you have these problems. I guess you would have this problem too. So what we do is we look at the average price of all the tenderers, and we set a certain threshold in advance. And if the price drops below this threshold, we are forced to have an interview with this contractor, and he has to clarify, preferably using dominant information, why his price is so low. And now I know that legally it's very hard to kick the contractor out, but we have this rule that if we have a suspicion about an abnormally low tender, we invite the contractor. Now, usually in the best value approach, we don't have this problem so often, but in a more traditional way of contracting, we do use this system. Okay, let's continue. So I already explained this. So these are things we ask from the contractors or the engineering firms. Project capability, risk assessment plan, value-added plan, price, interview. We also ask them for a milestone schedule. When we started using best value, we were also looking at the milestone schedule, but then we realized a milestone schedule is just the way the work is going to transpire, and it's pretty hard to judge a schedule, because a schedule is a schedule, right? So the schedule we only use for maybe preparing the interviews. So here's what we want. We actually want a contractor who can look into the future. Like he has a glass bowl, right? Maybe. And he knows what's going on. So if you have a good contractor or a good engineering firm, he can actually, before the project starts, he can actually look back from the end in his head and see what's going on. And he sees all the risks that are occurring, and he has a plan for them. So what we want is that the contractors use information and logic. For instance, what I see happening right now in the Netherlands is that if we talk about risk management, the usual way we assess risk is we set a group of people together, and they are quote-unquote experts, and we let them tell all their risk rights, and then we take these yellow things and we put them where we think is the highest risk. That's a very qualitative way of assessing risk. And what we want, of course, is that we start measuring what are exactly the risk occurring at our infrastructural projects? We have no idea. Every time we sit down with a group of experts. So here again, I think we have to start use data. We have to start use logic to assess our risks and also to assess the effect of our mitigation measures. What are successful mitigation measures? We have no idea. We should start measuring that. And that's what we want to achieve in the best value approach. We are asking from Witteveen and Bos and the engineering firms and all the contracts to start measuring. And if they don't have measures, they will not get good grades in the best value approach. So I can assure you that every party now is starting to measure themselves. Now we're talking about the weights, and the weights, from my experience, there are a few things that are really important. The most important thing is that price should be weighted for 30% or less. Now why is that? Because I think that if you weigh price for a higher percentage, you have a bigger chance of ending up with someone who's only competing on price. And he's actually beating the filter, so to speak. And I'll show you in my next presentation, our results show that even if we weigh price for only 25%, we still get number 1 or number 2 prize winning. And he also has the highest quality, so that's really interesting. And the logic behind the other criteria is, like I told you, the interview is the most important one, so we give that the highest rating. And then we say risk and risk mitigation is important, and then value added, and then project capability. So these are just figures, and you can change them a little bit if you like, but the logic behind it is interviews are most important, followed by risk, followed by value added, followed by project capability. And you can change it, but I don't really think it matters if you change it by 5 or 10%. I don't really think it matters if you just want to find the expert. So, of course, and this is the hard part, and especially for maybe the Czech Republic, if you're coming from a low price environment, the client must be comfortable with putting such a high stake on the quality. And I also visit a lot of municipalities, the lower governments in the Netherlands, and they really think that if you award more on quality, you're going to really pay more. But I have metrics to show that that's really not true. But it's sort of a leap you have to take as a client to go on a high percentage of quality, I think. And so the key for the contractors is to make things simple for us as clients. Because we were talking about a commission of experts. But I think this is really interesting. If you look at, for instance, risk and risk mitigation, and you as a client, you have a lot of expertise on what your risks are, right? And the contractors, they have to make a risk plan in order to win the project. And you have a committee of experts. Now, what is the first, where's Lucas? He's not here, I was going to ask him a question. He's in the back, okay, Lucas. So, if you know that the government has, is asking for a risk plan and they have a group of experts, what is the first question you're going to ask the government? Yes, of course. The first question you're going to ask is who is on the committee, right? Because you want to know who are assessing your bid. It's very important for you. Now, what's the second question you're going to ask? What do those people like to hear, right? Because you only want to write down what these people like to hear. So you want to know they like technical details, or maybe they like more abstract words. So you're going to find out what they want to hear. Is this best for project? This is not best for project. You're only writing down what the experts want to hear. So here's the trick. You should go make things simple. We should make it as simple as possible, so we actually don't need or hardly need expertise on the client side. Because the more expertise we use on the client side, the more subjective it becomes, and the less best for project, I would say. So the challenge for the contractors is to make things simple, like Albert Einstein said. So they have to really understand what they're doing. Okay. Now, to illustrate this point, I have an example, and I borrowed it from Dean Kashiwagi. And these are two, let's say, risk mitigation plan. And the project at hand is the design of a heating and cooling system. And it's about a technical risk. And you can see the two plans. And maybe you should first read it. I think the blank space is, there should be standing plan 2, but so the first plan is really short. Okay, so if you look at have you read it? At plan 1, what do you think about plan 1? Is that a good plan?
Yeah, they use the experience what they got.
They use experience. Does anyone agree? Does everyone agree with that? Plan 1 sounds like a good idea. Anyone disagrees, maybe? What do you think, Thomas? Plan 2 has occurred. What is plan 1? Use of experience. What does it tell me? Could be 20 years of experience in ruining projects, right? It doesn't tell me anything. Plan 1 is marketing. And you might even buy into this as a client because maybe you know this guy and you know that his experience is relevant. But what you're doing then is using your own expertise to make a decision. Whereas I just told you that we try to avoid the decision making on the client side. So what we're looking for in these plans are metrics and dominant information. And an example of this is plan 2. He has actually measured his own performance. He makes a claim how he's going to solve the risk, and he has the proof that it's actually going to work. And as you can see, this is not technical. And I would even say the more technical it becomes, the less I trust it. So we want non-technical, simple explanations so we as a client can easily understand that this is a contractor with a plan. So I sit in all these committees, and the persons I have the most problem with in doing this type of assessment are technical people. Because technical people, they always want to use their expertise to think of something. So I have to tell them, no, we don't use our expertise, we just look at what's written down in the plan, and this is what we assess. So this is an example of the way that we look at plans in the best value approach. I think I'm coming to a finish for the first part. So after the award, and I've just explained to you how we're going to find the expert, which is dominant and simple and non-technical, and is really based on performance measurements. Then we have the next phase, the clarification phase, and in this phase, the contractor has to convince the client that his proposal is acceptable. And this means that the client can actually ask more detailed questions about the plan, so the contractor can more elaborate about what he's going to do. And he's also going to make a more detailed schedule, and this proposal must be acceptable to the user. Now, do we ever, and a question people often ask me is, do we ever get rid of the contractor? At Rijkswaterstaat, it didn't happen yet. I know very few cases in the Netherlands where the contractor that won the first phase was actually kicked out of the second phase. And to me, that proves that these filters, they work really well. And in the third phase, we release control again, and we treat the vendor as an expert. And we only look at his quality system to see if he's delivering the project and services that we acquired. I'll skip this one. So I'm almost at the end of this first part of my presentation. In the second part, I'm going to elaborate more about case studies and about things that are happening in the Netherlands. What I wanted to tell you is that I think it's also part of the success of the best value approach in the Netherlands is that we actually translated the American book in Dutch. And we made one book for the procurement people, and we also made another book for the sales people. and we call it prestatieverkoop, because it's also another way of tendering your projects. It's also important that the contractors understand what they're doing. And then the yellow book, and Jeroen and I, we are the editors of that book. We have 20 case studies actually from the last few years, and we bundled them, and it was handed over in the last Best Value conference we had in the Netherlands last year. So that's it for now. I'm open for questions. I can think that I gave a lot of information, so maybe something to process.
If I may just ask, after the questions, you are going to carry on with another presentation.
Yeah, or we could have a cup of coffee maybe?
Well, probably not. We are a bit late, so we will probably extend a bit
sure.
in the lunch. But I would have a question. Probably I'll place it in Czech language. But the question would be focused on Mr. Fiedler. Well, the question is, I just put in English. The question is, we've seen that there is big emphasis on the clarification of the bids and interviews. Can we, in the future, do you foresee that the clarification of the bids, which means that you invite each bidder and you ask for the clarification and maybe have interview, would it be possible?
A teď tady nevím, v jakém jazyce mám odpovědět. Mohu i v německém, jestli chcete. Ta otázka, teď doufám, že jsem to správně pochopil, ta otázka směřuje do možnosti nějakých objasňování a jednání. Tady zase ten náš návrh směřuje samozřejmě, nebo chceme udělat to řízení co nejvíce flexibilní, ta limitace evropským právem, ale tady je Česká republika v rámci vyjednávání té nové zadávací směrnice byla jedním z členských států, která prosazovala velmi důsledně a důrazně, aby prvek jednání a vlastně možnosti objasňování byl přítomen ve standardních řízeních, myslím tím tedy ve standardním, čili v postupu, který může zadavatel použít kdykoliv. Jak si terminologii dnešního zákona, aby jednací řízení s uveřejněním bylo standardním druhem řízení, abychom ho mohli používat bez nějakých předchozích podmínek. Evropská komise tuto iniciativu několika členských států odmítla s tím, že tento druh řízení, tyto postupy nejsou zcela v souladu s koncepcí otevírání vnitřního trhu, že to řízení, to jednání vlastně je do určité míry omezující vůči cizím subjektům. Byť se nám tento názor rozhodně nelíbí a nepovažujeme ho za správný, tak nakonec tedy ta naše představa neuspěla. Na druhou stranu, pokud jde o podmínky použití jednání, a můžeme klidně mluvit o tom řízení, o tom jednacím řízení, tak tam přebíráme vlastně veškeré podmínky, veškeré možnosti, které nám dává evropské právo. Tady to, když se ale podíváte do té směrnice, tak ta možnost použití jednání a objasňování je mnohem širší. Jaksi v tom prostoru, který není regulován evropským právem, tedy přímo směrnicí, čili v té podlimitní oblasti, tak ministerstvo bude navrhovat nebo navrhne, aby jednací řízení s uveřejněním bylo možné bez jakékoliv podmínky, čili v podlimitním režimu jednací řízení s uveřejněním bude standardním druhem řízení. To, co ještě zvažujeme, je, do jaké míry připustíme možnost jednání a možnost nějakého objasňování u, já nevím, toho jednoduchého podlimitního řízení. To bude asi nějaká debata, jak se ta naše koncepce vycházela z toho, že pokud jsou zvyklí zadavatelé na nějaké řízení, tak není třeba vymýšlet zase ještě nějaké další navíc speciality v tom podlimitním režimu. A jinak samozřejmě, to se netýká úplně oblasti velkých projektů, ale souvisí to s tím, zavedeme plně ten takzvaný zjednodušený režim ve směrnici, je to tedy pod té anglické mutaci pod light režim. Tento light režim režim, ten zjednodušený režim vlastně zase zavedeme zcela v nejvyšším možném rozsahu, který nám umožňuje směrnice, a tam ten prvek jednání je ještě mnohem silnější. Ale chci upozornit na to, že vlastně v rámci toho nového zákona budeme opravdu řešit jenom to zadávací řízení. Vlastně ta jednání, ta příprava tím zákonem řešena rozhodně nebude. Není to vlastně vůbec otázka práva veřejných zakázek, to je vlastně otázka nastavení projektů a tohle vlastně my rozhodně nemáme ambici řešit.
Já vás poprosím jenom, myslím, že podlimitní nabídky můžeme dát asi stranou, teď se bavíme o těch velkých projektech. To znamená, vy říkáte jednak Evropa to obecně jakoby direktiva nám moc neumožňuje, tak otevřený řízení prostě jakoby bez debat, to asi použít nejde. A myslím, že tam je asi diskuse o tom, že jednání, ale po předložení nabídek, jakoby vyjasnění nabídek, třeba interview při otevřeném řízení.
No, byť jsme hledali nějaké cesty, tak že v zásadě ty principy jsou dva. Zase teď nevím, jak to říct pro tlumočníky. Ta první cesta je obálka nebo obálková metoda, nemyslím tedy nějaké obálky z úplatky, ale opravdu obálková metoda, čili tak, jak se nabídka dá na stůl, tak prostě platí. A ta druhá metoda nebo ten druhý přístup je jednací. Jo? Ono to vlastně je vyjádřeno v těch řízeních. My máme i stanovisko Evropské komise, nebo existuje výkladové stanovisko Evropské komise, který tady je starší než ty nové směrnice, a ty směřují k tomu, že vlastně to jednání přípustné obecně u těchto standardních řízení, a myslím tedy otevřené a uší, není tedy přípustné. Ale zase to určitě jaksi neomezuje možnost nějakých vyjasnění a tady vlastně tak, jak je to v současném zákoně, tak s tím počítáme i v tom novém. Tam nevidíme nějaký významový posun v rámci evropského práva. To znamená, pokud bude zadavatel něco nejasné, bude oprávněn samozřejmě požádat si o vysvětlení. To ani nevylučuje nějaké, že říkáte interview, to ani nevylučuje, že se ten zadavatel s tím dodavatelem sejde osobně a za nějakých rozumných podmínek tam proběhne nějaké vyjasnění, ale principiálně toto vyjasnění nesmí měnit nabídku. Zejména tedy my směřujeme k tomu, že nesmí být změněna nebo nesmí být změněny ty hodnoty, které směřují k hodnocení těch nabídek, těm hodnotícím kritériím. Tady opravdu cítíme, že jsme limitováni velmi. A pokud jde o ty ostatní řízení, o ty ostatní procedury, tak tam to už jsem naznačoval. Tam tomu otevření jsme velmi. Ono těch prvků jednání je u těch řízení, která nejsou jaksi bezpodmínečná, bez podmínek, těch možností je tam více. Ono právě proto jsou tam ty podmínky, protože tam probíhá nějaké jednání, nebo je to jeden z těch důvodů. Čili jednací řízení s uveřejněním rozhodně, tak jak jsem říkal, převezmeme beze všeho. Tam dokonce i cítíme, že ta směrnice je zbytečně rigidní. My jsme měli opravdu představu, že to jednací řízení nebude regulováno v tom smyslu, do kdy se smí jednat a jak se smí jednat. Když se podíváte na tu směrnici, tam bohužel vlastně je to dokonce tak, že to jednání není úplně regulováno, ale pak se udělá stopka, musí se dát nějaké konečné nabídky a o nich už se dál nesmí jednat. To nepovažujeme za šťastné a to je takový relikt té předchozí úpravy a bohužel zůstal. To se nepodařilo vyjednat. A ta ostatní řízení, která směřují k velkým projektům, může to být inovační partnerství, byť to jsou projekty jaksi inovativní, a může to být nějaký soutěžní dialog, který směřuje k hledání nějakých řešení. Tak tam samozřejmě to jednání rozhodně nechceme omezovat a tam naopak jaksi jsme v tom velmi, velmi otevření. Na druhou stranu tady zase jaksi narážíme na to, že v tom zákoně nebudou jaksi dílčí pravidla pro jednání. Dneska v zákoně máme napsáno téměř, kolik má být fází a jak ta fáze má začít a být ukončena. Takže tohle rozhodně nechceme regulovat, protože tady to je samozřejmě odpovědností zadavatele. Zadavatel by dopředu měl říct zásady toho jednání, jak to bude probíhat, ale rozhodně by neměly být stanoveny zákonem, protože tady rozhodně respektujeme samozřejmě specializaci charakter různých projektů.
Já děkuju. Wiebe.
Well, I have maybe a few, I understand what you say, of course. I have a few comments to make. First of all, we use the clarification phase in the open or the restricted procedure. And as you stated, I think this is possible as long as you don't change the scope, the price, or the schedule, right? So I think this is perfectly legal, and there's no problem doing it in the procedures we have right now, and you don't even need the negotiated procedure, I think. That's the first thing. And the second comment I'd like to make is, if you're looking for the best value tenderer, and you're going to negotiate his offer, I mean, that's not like a best value practice, because you want someone to give his best price and his best offer, and afterwards you're going to negotiate him to get a lower price or a better quality. I mean, that's not best value. So basically, what I'm saying is we don't need a negotiation procedure for best value anyway. Okay.
Já k tomu asi uzmu slovo, a k tomu asi 2 věty. Tady opravdu ta debata, myslím si, že je správná, směřuje k tomu, k nachystání toho projektu, k tomu, jak je ten projekt nastaven. To si myslím, že je rozhodně ta debata, která měla být vedena už dávno. Ta debata opravdu by neměla být o tom jako jak naimplementovat přípravu projektu do zákona. To bychom opravdu měli oddělovat. A druhá věc je, teď v zápalu boje jsem úplně zapomněl, co jsem chtěl říct. Já si možná vzpomínám, nebo to byla blbost, že to ani nebudu říkat.
Off topic? Okay. So any other questions, apart from this legal nitty-gritty?
Okay. If I may propose, let's save time for we will have the questions after your second presentation when things go together. So I mean,
yes,
if you don't mind.
If I can, I don't know if she's still there. I would love some more water because I've been speaking a lot.